how clever they are at hiding from the truth. So, just recently we had 2 manifestations of that are yet unexplored to get to the truth. One was the reason why they did not release the ExxonMobil contract, blaming the PPP for an amendment. The second was not addressing the question of auctioning the blocks available, and the allegation that there were several companies that had applied for the remaining blocks offshore that were linked to ministers, their families, etc. So they diverted attention and said we gave away all the blocks, which was not true again. And so we have just seen now, I think it was yesterday, another manifestation of this diversionary tactic. President Granger is now what if. So the president is quoted as having said, and I saw a headline today reflecting what he said, that the President Granger is dead set on fit and proper person, appointing a fit and proper person. And he claimed in his comments to the media that the ruling, he had read the ruling carefully, and that the ruling did not interfere with his authority to appoint a fit and proper person. Now, whoever claimed in this country that the ruling interfered with his authority to appoint a fit and proper person? Definitely not the Chief Justice, and I did not say that myself. Nobody said anything about the ruling interfering with his authority to appoint a fit and proper person. What we said was that the ruling dealt with some positions that the president had taken publicly. One, the first position was that only individuals from a certain category could be represented on the list. And that category comprised of people, the former judges, and people eligible to be judges. That was his first claim. The Chief Justice in her ruling said that is not accurate, that anyone who is deemed fit and proper by the opposition leader can be placed on that list. In fact, all 6 persons can be from the fit and proper category, and there is no requirement that all or any of the nominees be a person who was a former judge, or eligible to be appointed a judge. So the ruling dealt with that, his interpretation, his false interpretation of the Constitution. Secondly, the president said that he has to have a perfect list with all 6 nominees acceptable to him before he even considers naming an individual, a person, to be the chairman of GCOM. The Chief Justice again ruled against his interpretation of the Constitution, and she said in her ruling that even if one person from the 6 is found eligible or fit and proper, then the president should name that person. And thirdly, the president falsely claimed, again, that he did not have to give reasons for rejection of the list or names on the list. And the Chief Justice, again in her ruling, said he has to give reasons for the good governance purposes. And so he has not dealt with any of those three things where he used them as an excuse for rejecting the list, almost a unilateral, arbitrary, discretionary rejection of the list. He did not address those three issues that the Chief Justice had ruled on in her judgment. He dealt with nothing, now he says, nothing in the Chief Justice's ruling infringes on my authority to appoint a person who is fit and proper. It is a clever diversionary tactic again. This government runs from the truth, hides from the truth when they have nefarious motives. And so, even on the proviso issue, which you're all familiar with, the Chief Justice has said that in this case it's academic because several lists have already been submitted. And so I now hear that the president wants to meet with me. But he has to, as I said before the last press conference, now that we have a written ruling from the court, which is the only body in our country that can interpret the Constitution, and now that the ruling has dealt with all of those issues that I just spoke of, that the president has an obligation to respect and apply the ruling to the list of candidates before him. Now, if the president, in this country, if our president cannot find from 18 persons who are all professionals, who are of some standing in our society, who have demonstrated independent positions and actions, who have been impartial. He cannot find a single person who is more, and most of them are more technically qualified than the president himself and most of his ministers. You can't find a single of 18 fit and proper. Then something is wrong, not with those people anymore or the process. Something is wrong with him. And maybe he is not fit and proper to make this election. Because how long would this charade go on in the face of the ruling now from the court? And so what does he want to meet with me to say again? Now, normally, I'm very respectful of the institution, the presidency, because I was a former president too. And so if the president invites you to a meeting, you go to listen. But clearly, that was a diversion. How are you applying the Chief Justice's ruling to this list? He dealt with something totally different and ran away from the key question. Now, I've heard one of his ministers was overheard saying in the corridors of the court that the Banakan decided that we at Congress, please, got to make the decision. So maybe it is that the president has no authority to make this, that it's this decision, that it's dealt with elsewhere. And so somebody needs to say to the president, you have to address this issue seriously. Now, I wanted to, before I go on, to speak about some economic matters and the private sector summit next week, because I want to address that issue. I just wanted tangentially to show you how the fake news, particularly from Kaichor News, continues as a policy of that newspaper, and how ridiculous it gets sometimes in their attempt to excuse this government, to cast blame on the PPP, excuse them for incompetence, corruption, all of these things. So let's look at one of their headlines. GRA is working at 35% capacity now, up from 6% when the PPP left. 6%. So they measured it. Someone at the GRA, I don't know how you measure a qualitative issue like that, but they measured it at 6%. They're working at 35% now, and it will take them 5 years to get to 90%. At 6%, if it was working at 6% in the past, we were collecting $160 billion in revenue. The GRA was creating a ton of incentives. They said we are giving $55 billion per year in incentives to the private sector. That kept the economy growing. The GRA was supportive of the revenue collecting measures, which were solid in the PPP's era, as well as the growth in the economy. So their GRA is working at a better capacity now, a 35% capacity, and the private sector is just falling apart, and the confusion we witness. It's a lie. It's a lie. There's no way that you can quantify anything of that sort about what percentage of capacity. Then today's headline, Kaichor News, sugar sliding to worst performance in years. And then some guy, they said the reason must be that the sugar workers are not showing up to work, that there's a low turnout, and it's about 60% across the industry. Now, if they only took a moment to look at the historic figure, you will see that that is the average turnout, even the years of the PPP in government, about 60–62%. That was the average turnout. So now they're excusing the poor performance of the sugar industry. In the past, it used to be all about Jagdeo, PPP, etc. Now it's the workers' turnout, but the workers' turnout now may be even higher than under the PPP, because many of them are afraid of losing their jobs. So it is a lie, and they have some Harbajan, who's from what I heard, Nagamutu's poodle up in Berbice. And somebody said to me, he was surprised that a letter was in the newspapers, even with his name. He didn't even know the issues. Apparently, DPI produces these letters, Nagamutu and the others, and they put his name on it and send it directly to the newspapers. And so he doesn't even see the letters, so he's surprised when they go in the newspapers. But of course, lying again. The sole purpose is to excuse the government for poor performance in the sugar industry. It's not workers' turnout. It's not workers' turnout. It's what they're doing. They're demoralizing the entire industry. They're denuding it. 10,000 people are gonna lose jobs. Scotland didn't work in the first crop. They don't have working capital. They don't even have money to pay wages and salaries. So this is it. Then I saw that they're moving ahead with the sale of Gaisuko assets. So that's in another newspaper. So they created a special purpose company. Now, You would recall the history of privatization in Guyana. When we got into office, we shut down all the privatization. We took a white paper to the parliament. In that white paper, which is available, you can go back and check, we created a structure for privatization of state assets. And that structure, because in the past you had several entities doing it. Public Cooperation Secretariat, the Office of the President privatized some rice mills in Cane Grove. The Ministry of Finance was doing some. State Planning Secretariat was doing the telecoms privatization. All being done at different places. One was done by a special advisor, Barama, and some of DTL. So we said you can't have 5 entities doing it without no procedures. In that white paper, we said there shall be a technical unit, and we established the procedures that they had to follow, the privatization unit. They then had to report to a board made up of 3 ministers plus 3 persons from the labor move, 1 from the labor, 1 from private sector, and 1 from the consumer body. And then that group will make a recommendation to the cabinet. Now, when you establish a special purpose company like they did for the Durban Park, $1.4 billion fiasco that the Auditor General can't find the records for that special purpose company now, so he can't audit the spendings there. Then you establish another special purpose company for doing privatization. You don't have to follow the established procedures. Now, if a normal privatization will take the form of the unit doing a valuation of the assets first of all, they're moving to sell without valuation of the assets. So how do you know if you're getting a good deal? So it will not go to a board that involves the private sector, the labor movement, and the consumer affairs anymore. It will go from a unit directly to a couple of ministers, and the next day, and deals would be made there with no valuation of the assets, and one day we wake up and all of this gone. Now, a document was published, prepared by Brassington, that showed every privatization under the PPP between 1992 and 2011. Every single privatization. Every single one of them. So we have a track record on that and how it was done. How it was done. So this special purpose company is a vehicle for corruption. They don't have to follow any procedures, established procedures any longer. Then the Kaichor News goes on. So the new thing now, they're saying, oh, that people were hoarding money. I saw an interesting turn of events now. In the past, they were saying they inherited a bankrupt economy to the supporters of APNU. Then they said, oh, things are declining because we're cleaning out drug money from the country. Now the new thing is Jagdeo making the economy decline by telling people not to invest. And Kaichor News is in the forefront of peddling what they're saying on the ground. So, first of all, they said, Kaichor News said, I told regional chairmen not to sign contracts. So low rates of spending in the region. But you check Region 10 that they control, and you will see the same level of spending. And if you go to the Ministry of Public Works and the government on the whole, not leaving out the regions that we control, you will see the abysmal failure in implementing the public sector investment program. So much so that the IDB now today is saying that they want to help them to speed up, set up some delivery units. But the IDB needs to know that the lack of delivery on the contract is not because they're not aware of the procedures. It's because of the corruption. And so I hope the IDB doesn't get entangled in this farce because the many retenderings that take place subvert the procurement laws of this country. And I will be writing Washington, the Inter-American Development Bank, to point out all of these things. Several instances we're gathering up a file to do this. And so, how am I telling Patterson or his PS not to sign these contracts too? So, and they've moved that now to they're saying the same thing happening at the NDC level. This government has put in place all these REOs. These REOs are the chairpersons of the tender board. They have been routinely breaching the procurement rules when they want to, when there's corrupt activities. For example, in Region 6, buying drugs 10 times in the same day below the REO limit from the same company, the same drug. 10 different contracts in a single day. And so that is pure nonsense about us telling people not to sign contracts. The whole state is in a problem. The whole government is faced with this. So that's an excuse. Secondly, we didn't tell the people to slow down their business. In fact, if you look at the half-year report, the only sector that grew in the economy in a substantial way, because it had declined in the past, is the rice industry. So, and this is in spite of the problems that they've had, in spite of the increased fees they face, in spite of the increased charges that VAT on inputs and machinery. They defied expectation and grew. They should be thankful. That's the PPP's base. You know, so on sugar, we couldn't be telling the people not to invest there. That's the government. The sugar industry is in decline. But are they saying, I'm telling the people in bauxite and the small miners not to invest in Guyana? The reason why the economy is in trouble, not because Jagdeo telling the people not to invest, because no one wants to invest, apart from the mixed signals and the corruption, the policies. Why would a miner now go into mining when they're faced with 3 new taxes that were never there before, that will take away all their income, and then they have to pay to sell their gold too? And I'm talking about, did I tell them to put in place the 100% increase in the tributers tax? Did I tell them to move the 2% final tax into a 40% tax for the miners? Did I tell them to criminalize small miners? They have to hire accountants now, because if they don't have documents, the GRA can call them and send them to jail. They could go to jail for 6 months. People in the interior now have to keep receipts. They don't even have receipts. And then, did I tell them to put the VAT on equipment in the mining sector? Did I tell them to include the $2,500 increase in the sale of gold per ounce that the miners have to pay? This is why in the forestry sector, who would want to go in the forestry sector? That's why it's declining, not because Jagdeo told somebody, don't sign a contract. You think if people could make money, they would bother with Jagdeo telling them not to make money? They would be investing. But it's a clever way now. The excuse for cleaning out drug money is gone. Now the president is saying, I need an efficient police force to tackle drug trafficking anymore. I can't end narco trafficking. I need an efficient police force. So now that excuse has gone out the window. Now it's the PPP. By the way, and they're so desperate. $1 billion. So there's total desperation. I'm not going to go on anymore. I think I've made my point about these things. Kaichor News said people are holding the money. That's why the exchange rate is fighting. If they only look at the balance of payment, they will see the decline in inflows for foreign direct investment, for remittances from the export of goods. The market is determined by supply and demand. What the Granger administration did to stop the decline is threaten people not to sell their money at over a particular rate, or they would lose licenses to export. That is the exporters. So now the rate has been temporarily stabilized, but the market is still not clearing. The market is still not clearing. So a bunch of fake news and excuses by this government. Now, the private sector has been trying to put together a summit, and I want to commend them for this initiative. I heard they announced that I will be participating, speaking there, but unfortunately I cannot, since I will be abroad all week. Next week I have some activities planned abroad. We will be participating in the summit. So I've looked through the agenda, and the president is scheduled to make a keynote address in the first day. And the first thought that came to my head is not another speech on the good life. Not another speech on the Green State strategy. Not another speech on how agriculture in the hinterland is the new frontier. Not another speech about exporting value-added activities. And definitely not another speech about guava cheese and plantain chips. Because this is all that we are getting from the president. Pageantry. They love pageantry. A good speech that means nothing to people. They're going to have the investiture now and spend half of the state resources on the investiture because it's pageantry. Makes the president look good, gives out some medals, etc. And people are losing their jobs out there. They're losing their businesses. They see their whole future declining. Life is getting harder for them on a daily basis. And he's not addressing any of these real issues. So I hope that if the president talks about a good life, he will tell us in specific terms how we are going to achieve this. What are his specific plans for job creation? Not another just value-added kind of activity, etc. The slogans. How do people get a good life when they are paying? There's VAT now on education, VAT on healthcare, VAT on interior travel, the value-added tax on 46 food items that didn't have this. How do they get a good life when you're taking away their land and they're losing their jobs? So the president needs to tell us how he's going to fix this in real terms. I hope that when he says we have to manufacture more things and export more value-added activities, he would tell us about the daily blackouts that we have and how it would affect manufacturing and how he intends to fix it. And why is it that they're taking away incentives from the private sector? Not through taxes alone, but directly that they were benefiting from through remissions. He will address those things. And I hope that he will finally address us on his philosophy for the oil and gas industry in the face of all these scandals that are going on in the sector. Now, the president should be the one speaking about these issues. Too, he should say, here is what my government will do. I will ensure that we pass a commission, a petroleum commission, that is made up mainly of technical persons. My philosophy for sovereign wealth fund are these principles. Balancing spending to increase welfare with the need to protect the economy so that we don't have to experience the Dutch disease. This is where I'm going to get, this is when I'm going to table it to the Parliament. It's being discussed now. On local content legislation, he needs to tell us precisely what they want. And then on the remaining blocks offshore, he needs to tell us whether his government will auction those blocks. That would be a great speech to the private sector forum, because then this country, the members of the private sector and all of us in Guyana who've been clamoring for years for clarity on the government's policies would be enlightened. But not another good life speech, because that will be an absolute waste of time for this summit. So let me tell, I met with the private sector. Let me tell you what I said to them. I said, if this summit is about sound bites, count us out. We're not going to participate. We're fed up with sound bites from this government. Sound bites can substitute for real technical analyses and policies, and sound policies. So if it's about sound bites, we're not coming there. Ministers coming with a canned speech that they get somebody to prepare for them, read it out at the beginning or on the panel, and then don't want to address the real issues. So we expect, they assured me, the private sector said to us, that no, these panels will ensure that there is robust discussion and the issues are on topical issues in the public domain and that are important for the development of the private sector. It is upon this assurance that I got from the private sector that we have decided to participate, because we not participate in sound bites. Enough of that has been done in Parliament. The good thing about these panels here is that they will now have, some of the ministers hopefully will have to confront real questions, and they wouldn't have the protective cloak of the Speaker of the National Assembly, who truncates all questioning of the government's programs, etc., in a very partisan way, protects them. It's a cloak of protection that they get in Parliament. So we're hoping that the panels would allow a full exploration of these issues. So you would recognize that there are several panels there, and we will participate in all of these panels. In every panel, we are going to raise issues surrounding procurement. And I want to tell you so that they can come prepared. The ministers, we like to telegraph what we're going to say, or some of the things we're going to say at the panel, or we have good speakers, so they can come prepared. They can't say, oh, we're caught off guard. We want to say some of the things. We're going to ask in every one of these panels, because a lot of them deal with sector issues, about public procurement and the breach of the Procurement Act on a daily basis. The reason why we will do this is because the government procurement is the largest source of business for private activities in Guyana. The government is the largest spender, and therefore a transparent public procurement system where people are treated fairly has to be part of a summit on business development, or a business summit. And therefore, in every one of these panels, we have issues that we will be seeking answers from the ministers. So, for example, let me give you a couple of examples. On the energy panel, we would want to know why wasn't the benefit of the precipitous fall in oil prices between 2014 to 2015 passed on. You know, the oil prices tumbled from 2014 to 2015. And we want to know why this was not passed on to the consumers and the business community. We believe, and so we'll seek the specific figures from the minister, because they have been running away from giving this specific figure. When I said it's $20 billion that they've collected so far because of not passing on that increase, the decrease in the fuel prices, they said we are lying. But we believe by now it's over $22 billion, maybe close to 25, between 22 and $25 billion that GPL has collected. That should have gone, that should have remained in people's pockets. And so we'll be seeking specific answers to that. Then we want to know what are the specific plans at this time to end blackout. Specific plans. Now, don't tell us about oil and gas or gas, which will take 3 years, 4 years into the future. What are your plans to end the spate of blackout now? Then we'll ask, did the government read the report done by non-consult? And I'll come back to that issue because I want to address it separately. And why did they reject the project? And did Harman read, as I said before, I'm going to address that separately. Why did Harman read this report? And does he know that the report concluded that a miler would have saved the country $3.3 billion US dollars, over 600 billion Guyana dollars in 20 years? That was the conclusion of the report. But we'll come to that. So we'll seek answers to those issues there. Now, now that they've canned this project, how would they meet the renewable energy commitment that they made to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? Well, the IPCC pledges. Our country went on its own and pledged, nobody forced them to, said they by 2025, 100% of our power will come from renewable energy. So how is it that you're going to achieve this without constructing a miler? We'll want answers to that. And then we'll want answers to another question. Was a feasibility study done for oil and gas, for gas to generate electricity versus hydropower? Because as far as I'm aware, as we've been told from ExxonMobil, no feasibility study has been done for the gas sector. And we want to know, why did they sole source the contracts for the solar panels that are being installed in the interior? In this year's budget, we have about $1 billion for putting in place these solar panels for some communities. They have sole sourced this. Why did they do that? And what is going on with the wind farm project? So whoever is coming from the government, they can now come with answers to these questions, because the PPP representative there, the opposition representative there, will be seeking answers to these questions and many more, so that answers we can't get elsewhere from them, because they go mum, but hopefully in that forum we'll be able to get that. There is a panel on taxation. So we want to know, not about the 200 taxes and licensing fees alone, what is their philosophy in taxation? Would taxes seen only to collect revenue, or taxes as part of fiscal policy being used to stimulate the economy? Because depending on raising taxes or lowering taxes, a state can give a stimulus to the private sector. So what is your philosophy on taxes? Because you seem to want to scrape every cent out of past wealth and an economy that is declining, that is shrinking in size, so future tax takes would be lower. And in the process of doing that, you're removing incentives for production by putting taxes on a whole spate of productive activities. So we want to understand their philosophy for taxation. And hopefully we'll be able to get clear answers to that. There are lots of questions that we want to ask about in specific taxes, etc. How could you be talking about giving people a better life and then increasing the tax burden on them, ordinary people? What drives you to put taxes on education or on food items? What drives you to do that? When on some of those food items, a single car that we buy for a government minister will probably be, we pay more for that than the taxes we're collecting from some of those food items. And then on the governance, Nagamutu is supposed to appear there. So we hope Mr. Flip-Flop doesn't go rubber stamp, comes there to address some serious issues. And we're going to talk about several governance issues, but the key one will be about public procurement again. Public procurement, we have a long list of about 45 breaches in the last year alone of the tendering system. Even now as we're speaking, they're trying to usurp education of the Procurement Act by taking on functions, the executive taking on functions that should be within the purview of the PPC, the Procurement Commission. And we know now that ministers should have already given up this no objection rule, but they are not limiting themselves to a no objection rule. When we remove the cabinet, when we pass this law, we remove the cabinet from the approval of contracts. And we said that the cabinet must have a no objection rule until the PPC comes into place. Now, the no objection, for the cabinet to exercise the no objection, it has to give reasons why it is withholding its no objection, its no objection, and write the tender board explaining why. It cannot then say, we're stopping this contract, so give it to another person. This is what this cabinet is doing. It is now gone back to the approval of contracts, not exercising a no objection rule any longer. And the prime candidate for audit will be a police audit, with special people will be the operation of the tender administration, the central tender administration. They are complicit in a ton of illegalities. Prime candidate in the future for audit, I'm telling you. Prime candidate. And so we will be addressing all of these issues. Let me make it clear that if the ministers are going to come there to, well, the public will see, because these are the questions that are going to be dealt with. But if they want to come and make canned speeches, we have no interest in participating in any summit that will just get a repetition of the slogans with no serious attempt to address the issues faced with our economy. But so far, based on the assurances we got from the private sector that we will be allowed to raise all of our concerns there, we are slated for participation. Personally, I will not be there, but we have others. I just have to end by a couple of things. I wanted to come back to this whole saga of Amila Falls Hydro-Canned, Harman, Starbuck News. And I just wanted to deal, I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I'm going to quote from the article. Asked specifically if that means that the government was not prepared to go and find another investor, Harman replied, no. The point is, are you going to give us money to do that? To go and find another investor? Harman explained that with an estimated US $1 billion AFHP project, government could not fund it on its own, even if it accessed the $80 million that the Inter-American Development Bank is holding through an agreement with Norway. For the government of Guyana, he explained, the case for producing energy through Amila Fall is not as easy as many believe, since there are myriad questions left unanswered, and a fact-based assessment by consulting company Norconsult highlighted these facts. So that's what Harman said. Harman said, we're canning this project because we don't have money to go back to tender. Who will give us money? And that the consultants that came in from Norway, who the government agreed to do a study, an independent, fact-based study after they had claimed the project was corrupt, that those people raised a lot of questions. Well, let's go. This leads me to conclude that neither Harman nor Patterson nor anyone in this government has ever read the Norconsult report. They're jeopardizing our entire agreement with Norway because of these loose statements, and they're harming the future of Guyana for cheaper renewable energy by this ignorance, total, unadulterated, ridiculous, I can't even, sort of ignorance. The Norconsult report said, page, if you go and read it online, anybody could read it. It says, on page 3, the only realistic path for Guyana towards an emission-free electricity sector is by delivering its hydropower potential. That's one. We regard the soundness of the Amila Falls hydropower as evident, the soundness as evident. And in order to follow up the intentions of the LCDS as fast as possible, we recommend the preparations for Amila Falls hydropower project to be resumed, page 38 of the report. It says, it is our opinion that the boot-type public-private partnership model should be maintained for the project implementation. Now notice, Harman said, who will give us the money? That the government doesn't have the money. But if he understood the model, the boot model, that was all of our contribution to the project, the money we were getting from Norway. Because the rest was a combination of equity from private partners and loans to the investors, who would have then supplied power to the government of Guyana at half the price of that we were paying at that time for electricity. That would save us a large sum of money, and we would have had the biggest investments without not a cent of debt to the public treasury. Not a cent of debt. But this guy says, who's going to give us the money? He didn't read the report. The boot model was recommended, as we had. And then, construction. So they were talking about corruption too. The report said, after competitive bidding between 5 pre-qualified candidates, AFHI in 2008 selected China Rail First Group as EPC contractor. AFHI is not the government of Guyana. It was the developer that selected the company. Notice anyhow, I'll come to that in a moment. Let me don't get sidetracked. So, and then that's on page 12. On page 32, this is what it says. Constructing Amila Falls would cut electricity costs by more than 50% for the energy produced by Amila Falls hydropower project, or $3.3 billion US over 20 years. $3.3 billion US dollars multiplied by 200 is close to 700 billion Guyana dollars we would save in 20 years. Just imagine the staggering proportions of the number. And these people are not going to pay attention to it. This is an independent consultant hired by Norway, one of the most respected consultancy group. And they're running around with this man, Lloyd Singh, and the hydropower, what's his name, the wind farm, and a couple of other things. This is it. And now talking about gas. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that we have people who don't read even reports that are commissioned. The display of ignorance is unbelievable. It's embarrassing for me as a former president, as the leader of the opposition, what people think of our country when we have this level of incompetence and ignorance. So, someone should get this report and gift wrap a copy and give it to Harman, and another copy to Patterson, and one to the president. Should gift wrap these reports. Maybe we will do that. And then on the last one, you notice that there were 5 persons pre-qualified for a Myla. So they didn't do the probability test like Patterson wants to do. It is the most asinine, ridiculous explanation that I've heard coming out from any ministry. Using probability of success as one of the factors in determining how restrictive the tender should be. Who does that? Who gives such an explanation? It is unbelievable. I'm dumbfounded. It is this sort of thing I wake up to every morning and I can't believe. Sometimes I don't even want to come out of my bed when I read the news because of this level of nonsense. And it's all to hide corrupt activities. Because we believe they already know the people they're going to pre-qualify. They've already been talking with firms, a particular firm. We're watching it carefully to do this. And so we heard about some IDB energy mix study early in the year. Gas wasn't in it. I don't think so at that time. So suddenly that disappeared. The IDB is, and the international institutions now have to look at their own credibility with these things. Because we are going to, as I said before, we're going to make sure that we raise all of these transgressions, including in the use of funds from international organizations. Look at GWI. GWI is implementing a big IDB-funded project. And the person they have there running the entity is a politician who was not recruited through any tender process. Now, in the past, the IDB used to look at governance in each of these institutions. But it seems as though now they have stopped looking at governance in these institutions, where you had to select the senior leadership through a competitive process. So those are some of the issues. Yesterday I visited Linden, and may I just urge the president that people want him to go there and meet with them to address their concerns, not to go to these activities with 10, 15 people at 5 o'clock in the morning and then leave at 8 o'clock, by 8 a.m. or go to the party office to open it and then don't meet with residents. People supported this government, a lot of people in that region, and they're totally disappointed. They're losing jobs, there is no hope for the future, and they're not hearing anything from the president or anyone who goes on the ground. When they go on the ground, it is more to stir up partisan issues, like land issues now, trying to throw some people off some land, repossessed land. They have their regional activists who are disrupting all the systems, putting in fake CDCs, going into Amerindian communities without required permission. The people in that region, they need answers too. And as is characteristic with this government, they just pop in, share out a couple of things to a few people, and then they disappear. They don't want to face scrutiny and have people ask questions about their policies because they have none. And all the promises they made to people, they're breaking now. So I hope that Granger, the next time he goes to Linden, will go around and meet people. Thank you very much.
Mr. Jagdeo, Marcel Thomas from Starbucks News. My question on GCOM is twofold. One, what is it, if you're preempting what the president wants to meet you about, and you don't know that he probably would have selected someone and wants to give you that news?
That's why I did not close Marcel, the door to the meeting, because I'm hoping that he's calling me to say I've selected someone from your list. Because there's a difference. In the past, he would write me and say, I don't accept, that the list. I have not accepted anyone from the list. So there is a change here. He wants to see me, and I'm hopeful, just as you may be, that I'm being called to get good news. So if the president asks to see me, that's why I said right at the beginning, when the president asks to see, because I respect the institution, I will attend the meeting. So,
I said the question is twofold.
All right, the second part, yes.
What if it is to say that no one was chosen? What are your options, and what are you going to do?
I don't think he needs to call me to tell me that, given the practice in the past. So let us say I'm hopeful. Let us say I'm hopeful because in the past he has just written me and to say I did not find anyone acceptable. So I'm hoping the departure from how I get the news now means that it's positive news. So let's keep it at that. Let's keep our fingers crossed and our hopes up. Although a lot of people think that that's naivety.
And another question, you said Mr. Brassington had a list of all the...
Yeah,
you'll make that list
available? I can send you the report that was done. I think it's a report. It's in the public domain. Privatization in tables, and it's available. And you can see every single entity done between 1992 to 2011. If you ask the several companies they privatized pre-1992, whether a report was done on it, not yet. You don't have a report. And we have a report from every single transaction that flowed through the privatization unit, even small plots of land in Linden, etc., that flowed through that unit between 1992 and 2011. And you should have a copy of it. I'm sure if you don't have a copy, we'll get a copy to you.
Sir, you were critical of this special purpose unit
company.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are any options, or do you plan on challenging it somehow?
We're looking, because you just get bits and pieces in the newspapers. So they had the money, and now they're setting it up. So, and they're planning to invite people in to buy up the things. That's what we're not getting any, we have not gotten any special information. But my worry is that they moved it out of that framework, how we address privatization in the past. So no one else has a say from the outside, including the business community, the labor movement, or the consumer body. And so we'll be watching it carefully. And then people should be asked, if you're selling something, you should value the assets. Remember when they sold GT&T, there was no valuation of the assets. So how do you know if you're getting a good deal if you don't value? You know, a normal thing. If you're selling a house, they ask you for a valuation and stuff like that.
What was the money set aside to hire an international firm?
Well, but that is it. So we should ask them if they're valuing the assets. That's what somebody should ask. Will this firm be engaged in doing a study to value the assets that we are privatizing? Now that we agree with it, but are you going to do it? And if so, why not? Why are you proceeding to do this? So at one stage there was a valuation, when you look at it as a going concern, of close to $1 billion of the industry. And would lands be included too as part of the sale, and what the value will put to the land, and all of those things. So it's important.
Mr. Jagdeo, at the business summit, you said the opposition would come prepared with a whole host of questions, but are you hopeful that you will get any answers from the government members and panels?
Well, the private sector assured us that the format would allow for free, frank, robust, topical discussions. And you don't have the parliamentary setting where from the time you have to almost clear every word, like the speaker is the word police in there. So you almost have to clear every word to describe anything happening in the government. So hopefully that format, the panel discussion, without speeches by ministers, prepared speeches by ministers, because the panel discussion would allow Dominic Gaskin to come and tell us all of his wonderful plans. And then we'll get a chance to ask him about it, because we have quite a few questions for him too. He is just one of the many dodos in the government.
And on natural gas, you spoke a lot about why Amaila would be the best choice for Guyana, but given that government has shelved that project, what are your thoughts on their plan or their vision to pursue natural gas?
But you see, this is it. For me, it is, we have to make decisions based on technical assessments, have professionals do the study. We get criticized a lot, and I even personally, for Amaila, for the Skeldon factory. But if you go online now and you go to the Booker Tate website, you will see that Booker Tate itself said that the government approached them in 2000 to do a study. And they did this study for the industry, and they were then hired and paid over $5 million to oversee the construction of the factory. They did a feasibility study. They concluded it was feasible. We sought the investors through a competitive process, and they were hired to oversee the construction and the design and everything. We went with technical people. As politicians, we have to take the blame if the factory doesn't function. But we allow the best in the industry at that time was considered Booker Tate to lead the way, do the study. And so we get criticized for it, but if you go online now, you will see that. You will see that they said they did the study. Now, in this case, all I'm saying is allow the technical studies to guide the political decisions. So here you had Norconsult doing a technical study on behalf of the government and the Norwegian government, and these are the conclusions. There is no feasibility study done on gas as yet as a source for generating electricity in the future. So what happened? We should do that study and then compare the two. Now my worry is, and questions may be asked about this. First of all, gas is not renewable. But what if in the future, because we didn't find a gas field, we found oil. So the gas, we're taking some of the gas, or may want to take some of the gas to bring it onshore. But what if oil prices fall so low that and the unthinkable happens, and that ExxonMobil decides to stop production for a while because they're making huge losses on the field? What happens? Because they're not pumping oil, there is no gas to it. What happens to our long? We would have made huge investment onshore. What will happen to the gas supply at that time? And so these things have to be discussed in great detail. But this government is interested, and I think ExxonMobil is approaching it from that perspective, because you're not talking about a project until 2022, even if it is feasible. This government deals with headlines, so we have all the blackout. So first of all, this is a PPP problem, and secondly, this is not our problem, the PPP, never mind we're in government. And secondly, you get the headlines, government exploring gas options. So everybody say, yeah, okay, at least they're working. They're not doing anything. They're not addressing the immediate problems. And so that is my concern. Let the technical studies guide the political decisions. Technical, as we did. And when a report by a consultancy body disrespected concludes that the country will save in 20 years $3.3 billion US. The cost of constructing a mile is less than $1 billion. $1 billion. In 20 years, you can pay back for a mile just from the saving 3 times over. No, 3, 4 times. Who will not want to go for a project of this nature? And you don't have to find a cent if it's properly structured. The country, that is from the treasury. Or we don't have to guarantee debts, because we just probably have to guarantee the payments that GPL will make. If they fail on the payments, then the state would have to step in. But since they're buying power for half of the price what they were generating and in 2012, then they would be able to pay, because they're getting a cheaper source power. So they should be running after this project. They should be consuming the government, because it's such a big impact for Guyana that it will have. And you know, if we had built it in mid-2017, we would have had hydropower supplying Guyana by now. This was the year 2017 to turn it on. They killed it. And so politicians have to let the numbers guide them. They have some harebrained scheme, and they run after it without even doing the studies.
Can I follow up?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Mr. Harmon would have put forward an argument, and it's where government based its decision, and specifically to Amila, dealing with the intellectual property rights. In that Blackstone had it, and now I think China Rail is bought into some aspect of it. They don't have access to it, and it gets complicated with Norconsult itself saying that China Rail, they had a problem with China Rail executing the project. So how do you get around the technicalities of that in pushing a project when you have no access to
sure.
But
the thing is that if you spend $5 million or $10 million buying the intellectual property rights, that is all the studies and everything that a lot of money the Blackstone had spent on doing the studies, environmental studies, designs, all those things. So you don't have to do it back again. So imagine you spending $10 million US to acquire those rights, but you can save $3.3 billion. You just add that to the cost of the project. If the government will not have to buy it, the private developer who we invite in through the booth arrangement will buy those property rights and pursue it. The government doesn't have to find a cent to buy their property rights. That will be bought. And then if this government is serious, I'm sure that the president could write a letter to the president of China or talk to the ambassador here. China Rail is a state-owned company. The Chinese government will be willing to help. I'm sure they can do that. If the desire is there, you can do that. We can even, I think, from the government side, acquire back the property rights and sell it back at a profit too to the project developer. Because of the clout that bilateral relations between Guyana and China are good, always have been good. They would help us. Why not do this? But these people just make excuses. They don't think about solutions because they can't make, maybe it will take too long for them to make money on a mile. They want to make money now. That's my view. And you know what I mean by making money. I don't mean the company. Right, thanks.